Welcome to MilSpouse Matters, the podcast dedicated to encouraging military spouses. I'm your host, Jen McDonald, and I was a military spouse for nearly 30 years until my husband's retirement. I'm now the mom of 4 young adults, including 1 active duty son. I also wrote the book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse. Through my experiences, I came to believe that we're only stronger together. Whatever life is throwing your way as a military spouse, let's talk about it. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the MilSpouse Matters podcast. I hope you're doing absolutely fabulous wherever in the world this finds you. And speaking of all over the world, I want to give a shout out to all the overseas listeners. We've seen a big uptick in listeners from Germany, Japan, the UK, Ireland, Italy, Guam, Korea, Spain, Canada, and lots of other countries. So welcome wherever you're listening from. And whether it's your first time joining or you're a longtime listener, I'm so grateful that you took time out today to listen to the podcast. So if you love the show, can I ask you to subscribe and share it? That is one of the most helpful things you can do to bring the podcast to other listeners. Just a reminder, you can always find the complete show archive at jen-mcdonald.com or milspousematters.com. They both go to the same place. Listen to all the past episodes, find show notes. Any resources we mention are always in the episode notes, and easy buttons to subscribe wherever you're listening. So my book for military spouses, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse. I know some people are doing book clubs or sharing them with newcomers to their base or giving them as a gift somehow to other military spouses. So if you are wanting to buy them in bulk, orders of 10 or more books, I give a 10% discount. All you need to do to find out more is send me an email at jen@jenmcdonald.net. If you're looking for more support in your military spouse life, I hope you'll take a look at my brand new, redesigned, updated website. I'm so excited about it. I think it's really easy to find resources. You can find PCS resources, help for your military marriage, lists of resources for your military kids, all kinds of stuff. Tara Cochran from Olive Fox Design redid my whole site. It's just, I'm just so happy with it. And I think it's really easy to find what you need. And if you're interested, feel free to join my Christian Military Spouses Facebook group. Just do a search for it and fill out the questions and we'll get you right in. So one thing I wanted to bring back was sharing some of my favorite things. And so I thought I would share a couple of those with you today. So I already alluded to one, Olive Fox Design, and you can find her at olivefoxdesign.com. If you are looking for branding or help with your website, I will link to her. Go check her out. She is so thorough and so good. And one of the things I really loved about the process working with her was that there was a reason behind everything from the type of font to the color. Just reminded me of why I'm doing what I do and the foundation of what's behind everything I do as a business and as a podcaster and as a writer. And it was just so wonderful working with her. The second favorite thing I wanted to mention this week, I know military families love to travel. And one of my daughter's friends, also was a military kid. She's a young woman now, but she is an Irish dancer as well and travels all over the world and then travels for fun. But she has put together travel tips, especially if you're traveling solo, and all kinds of travel guides for places all over North America, Europe, and Asia. She's one of those people that just travels with one bag that she carries on. I've never been able to do that. But she talks about how to travel lighter, how she plans her trips. She stays in Airbnbs and definitely travels on a budget. So if you're wanting to find out more about that, you can find more at sleepingontrains.com and check that out for some great, amazing travel tips. So I'm talking today to Trevor Romain about grief. You might remember him from episode 63, where we talked about his work with military kids. And I believe we kind of lightly touched on grief. And then we talked about that, having him come back to share more of his experience and some advice and wisdom and just real talk about grief, because grief is so uncomfortable, but is also universal. So I thought this would be something that you really might benefit from if you're trying to help your kids walk through some grief, like losing a grandparent or a parent even, or even yourself, because I think like I said, we all go through it. And sometimes it can feel really lonely. So I think this will be such a helpful episode to you, whether or not you are currently walking through grief, because we will all deal with it at some point. I first heard of Trevor back around 2009, 2010, probably before that, because I believe my son used to watch his PBS show. He's a great artist, and he had a show for kids. But I first heard of him through the Comfort Crew for Military Kids, which is a support to military kids all around the world, and especially with deployment. And so my own children benefited from it and had the little comfort kit. They went to one of his assemblies in Germany, and then we connected them with the comfort kit, and it had a little movie and like this little stuffed animal named Cuzzy Cares. And my daughter, that's 23 now, still remembers that. And so I've known of him for quite a long time, but he has also spent decades working with children, with terminally ill children. He also worked with the UN for children living in conflict areas, and also visited and worked with former child soldiers in the Congo, Burundi, Rwanda, and Uganda. So he has really got some experience behind this grief work. He's also the co-founder of the national nonprofit, the Comfort Crew for Military Kids, as I mentioned, and he's the president of the Trevor Romain Company, which offers a lot of materials for all sorts of topics: divorce, bullying, grief, all of the kinds of things that kids go through that maybe might not be the most fun to talk about, but he has just such an insightful way of connecting to kids. I would really encourage you to check out the Trevor Romain Company at trevorromain.com and take a look at all the books and digital downloads and all sorts of materials that maybe you could use as a resource for your military kids. And if you do decide to purchase something from the Trevor Romain Company, go ahead and use my code, either all caps, Milspouse Matters or Jennifer, and you get a 15% off of your purchase. A couple of things we discussed in this talk, I wanted to link to that. There was an article called "The Death We Die Doesn't Have to Define the Life We Lived." That was a really good resource for me after my brother died. Just talking about remembering people, not just how the end of their life was, but who they were as a person. And then Trevor also shared a TED Talk with me that's called "We Don't Move On from Grief, We Move Forward with It." And I think these are really good tools if you are currently walking through grief. So after you listen to today's episode, I would love to hear from you and what you thought. And if you have any additional resources about grief that you think would be worth sharing, send me a message and I will share them on my social media. So thanks for listening, and let's get into our talk with Trevor. So hello, everybody. Today I am talking to Trevor Romain, who you might remember from episode 63 when we were talking about his amazing work with military kids. Trevor Romain is a best-selling author, illustrator, and keynote speaker who was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and now lives in Hawaii. He hosted a popular television series that has been featured on a number of PBS stations. His books have sold more than 1 million copies worldwide and have been published in 22 different languages. Today, he serves as the president and co-founder of the Trevor Romain Company and co-founder of the 501c3 charity, the Comfort Crew for Military Kids. You can connect with Trevor and the Comfort Crew all across social media, and we will be sure to share those links in the episode notes. So in episode 63, we spoke about Trevor's work with military kids, like I mentioned, and we kind of briefly touched on the topic of grief. And so I thought it would be great to have him back to talk more about that subject. So welcome, Trevor. It is so great to be speaking with you again today.
Thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy talking to you, and even about difficult subjects like grief. You know, I know that maybe some people are like, "Uh-oh, maybe I don't need to listen to this podcast." But I think it's really important that we look at something like grief and allow ourselves to be able to be in it and feel it, and that's how we learn and get experience in dealing with grief when it comes our way.
Well, it's part of life. I mean, it's just, you are going to face it. It doesn't matter. You don't get out of it, you know?
Yeah.
It's just part of life. So before we get into that, I want you to give us any updates. Since we last talked, we were just talking about you getting to be in person again with military kids, and which I know you love doing. So fill us in on what's coming up for you as far as projects and, you know, events, etc.
Sure. So one of the loves of my life is being able to give back to my new country. And I always say that I'm an American by choice. I was born somewhere else. So being able to serve our military, who are affording me the safety and the comfort and the peace that I have in my home, I'm very happy to give something back. And because of COVID, our touring had to stop. And we've spoken to over 1 million kids in the last 12 years. Wow. And I've done, I think, 1,200 and something school assemblies. So I'm happy to say that we, if all goes well, in the beginning of November, are going to resume touring, and it looks like we're going to start off in the San Antonio area. That's all, of course, depending on what happens with travel and how things change so quickly. But right now, it seems like we will, and I'm very excited to get back in front of kids. I'm a 14-year-old trapped in an older dude's body, and being able to be with my peeps is fantastic. So, because adults bore me to tears, and so kids they are amazing. We so doom and gloom with our kids and say, oh, the kids of this generation. I think that they're going to do the stuff that we haven't been able to do because we have too many meetings.
Yeah, true. And, it's funny because my little 5-year-old granddaughter started with the little transitional kindergarten, like between preschool and kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And so they came back out. She lives in another state, and they came back out with the mandate that the little ones had to wear their masks to school. And so she could not care less. She's like, she is fine. It's kind of not to like make it political or anything, but like some of the things that we stress out about, it doesn't even faze her. Oh. And she's got, her dinosaur mask and her, Minecraft mask. And so she switches them out and
Sure. We project onto kids whatever's bothering us. And kids are pretty resilient. They way more than we sometimes give them credit for. And they go about their business. Listen, you got to play. And when it's time to play, put a hat on my head, if you think about it, look at the kids who live in areas where there's snow. They could put a snowsuit on that they can't even move. They put the snowsuit on, they bundled up, they walk like the sort of a mummy, and then 5 seconds later they have to go to the restroom, and all that stuff has to come off. So, but they adapt and they do it.
They are just fine. Well, you must be one of those people that takes your energy from other people. I'm sure you've been missing, like you said, seeing your folks around the world. So I'm glad you get to get back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feed off the response of kids at assemblies, and there's nothing better in the whole world than seeing a child laugh really hard. And that's one of the things that I do is when I speak to kids, I use humor, even for very tough situations, because sometimes we really have to laugh. Even when it's very, very sad, because endorphins are released and cortisol drops, and it helps us cope. I'm looking forward to getting up there and seeing kids laugh again, because I think we've been laughing less over the last few years.
Oh, I would agree. That would be yeah. I think it's amazing, and I'm really glad you get to be back with them. Well, and speaking of humor, I think that you do a very good job of injecting humor into tough topics, all of your books and resources. But today, kind of just really focusing in on your grief resources. And you've got a few of those. So why don't you give listeners an overview of those and what motivated you to create them?
Absolutely. So it all started with a book called What on Earth Do You Do When Somebody Dies? And that book came about when my father passed away. And my niece and nephew were 8 and 6 years old at the time, I believe. And I wrote them a letter, just a simple letter, because that had some questions. Why do people have to die? What happens to someone after they die? Am I going to die also now? Can I still laugh if somebody has died? So I actually wrote a letter and answered all those questions. And somebody said to me, why don't you submit that as a book? Because it it really is, it's very, very simple, but it answers some very, very difficult questions. And so I
Yeah.
did. And my publisher, who does the self help series of books, Free Spirit Publishing, they agreed, and I was very, very thrilled that they did. So,
Yeah.
so that's how that came about. And then once I started working with military kids. We were invited at one time to go to a school where a parent had passed away who was downrange, and they asked me to come and speak at the school. And after that, I developed a memory box, a comfort box,
Mm.
which has the video based on the book. It's animated video, and it has a journal, and it
Mm-hmm.
has a little plushy toy, a little mouse called Coco. And we called her Coco because she has big ears and she's a good listener. And it's the same feeling when you drink a cup of cocoa, how you feel. So we created a memory box. And the way I designed the box was to leave it on the front of it, leave space for kids to be able to decorate and remember the person that they're grieving for by either writing their name or sticking pictures on or what have you. So the memory
Mm.
box, and I'm very, very proud that our memory box is given out at Dover Air Force Base during dignified
Oh,
transfers. So that's one of my most proudest achievements is being given permission and the honor of serving families who have lost a service member.
oh, that's wonderful. I didn't know that. That's so great.
Yeah.
Well, I did watch the What on Earth Do You Do When Someone Dies little, I guess like a little short movie.
Yes.
So I really love the way that you take such a tough topic about what does it feel like when someone dies, and just kind of tackle those questions that kids have. Like you don't shy away from it. You know, the things that they ask, even about funerals and cemeteries and where do we go? And then the idea of heaven. And one of the things I loved about it is you're so respectful of differing beliefs, because people are going to come at this from different backgrounds, obviously. But I think whether it's a child that's lost their beloved pet or a parent or someone else they love, like in the movie, it's the grandmother. Just maybe you can give some advice to how do we have these difficult conversations with our kids and help them process their grief? This is a huge question, I know. But how do we, being honest without scaring them? And I think you've done a really good job of that, but maybe some tips for parents as they walk with their kids through those hard moments.
Absolutely. That is a great question. And that was one of the most difficult parts of doing that movie and the book, was to be able to say, look, there are people who have different beliefs, and different people, it's like different people celebrate different holidays, and different people
Mm-hmm.
believe different things. And in that particular video, the little girl, her family believes that you do go to heaven, or a place hereafter, and she goes off to meet her grandma. And the way I designed that movie was to be able to have the grandma who's deceased be the person who's comforting the little girl, and it's in her dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just wanted to be able to speak directly about stuff like,
Yeah.
the little girl asks her, what does it feel like to die? And
Mm-hmm.
the grandma says, well, I didn't really feel, very much. And she, allows the little girl, because what happens often with little kids is that we've seen so many movies, and there's so much um, in these movies and books where the cemetery is the scary place. And when someone
Right.
dies, it's usually painfully. And so we have that in our minds when we imagine them, and we don't want anybody to be in a scary place. So
Right.
I often tell parents, look, when you're sitting down with a child, tell them to ask you questions. And I
Mm-hmm.
always say, instead of telling kids what we think they need to hear, we should really listen to what they're asking for. And sometimes they
Mm-hmm.
just want reassurance that you're okay, because oftentimes it's the person, the grandparent has passed away, or it's a brother or a sister or sibling, and they worry about their parents being upset, so they don't want to ask them
Yeah.
questions for fear of upsetting them even more. So
Mm-hmm.
being able to give children an avenue to ask you questions, and that's actually one of
Mm-hmm.
the reasons I created the comfort box, the grief kit, is that
Yeah.
sitting and decorating it together allows you an opportunity just to discuss the subject while you are just working on something. I have found that sitting and sketching and talking to kids when you're both drawing or being in a place where they feel comfortable uh, expressing what they're feeling, they tend to be really honest about what's on their mind. And it's
Mm-hmm.
okay if you don't have the answer.
Yeah.
To be able to say, I've been thinking about that too. Wow, that's a really, really good question. Instead of sort of being so afraid to get to that uncomfortable, painful place that we push it away. So we've found over time that allowing kids to be in that discomfort gives them an
Yes.
opportunity to work through it and to be able to understand how they feel. If we can help them
Yes.
define their own feelings, then those are coping mechanisms to be able to manage their feelings. And a lot of time it's fear, and fear that, oh, this could happen to me, or are they going to be lonely without me? So
Yeah.
those are the kind of things we don't think about. We
Yeah.
basically think about our as adults, that pain is so intense that all we can think about is, how do I get rid of this pain in my heart?
Yeah.
Kids have the pain, but being able to give them an opportunity to express what they're feeling, instead of just brushing it aside and not talking about it, is not healthy for kids.
Hey, friends. I just want to take a moment to talk about one of our wonderful sponsors, SpouseLink. SpouseLink's philosophy is simple: military spouses matter. It was created in 2012 by AFMA, the American Armed Forces Mutual Aid Association, and SpouseLink is the place where military spouses can connect with others who are living the military lifestyle just like they are. Connect with SpouseLink to get information and advice for your military family. And you can also meet up with one of their military spouse ambassadors on location or online for a fun and informative event. Or if you like to write, they're looking for bloggers. SpouseLink is always looking for military spouses who have something to share with their audience, whether it's a personal story based on your experience, career or workplace tips, parenting advice, or anything else that can support, inform, or inspire their audience. Head on over to spouselink.org to read their blog, connect with SpouseLink on their social channels, and then listen to their podcast, At Home with SpouseLink, which is hosted by their awesome SpouseLink ambassadors. Remember, you can find all of this at spouselink.org, so check it out today. Some adults maybe think they don't want to bring it up and make the child upset if the child doesn't say anything about it. And I would say, having gone through something difficult when I was young, just because nobody talked about it or I wasn't talking about it didn't mean I wasn't thinking about it. And so I think what you said, letting them, asking them, do they have questions, letting them tell you what's on their mind versus just thinking if they're not saying anything, then they're fine. That's not true.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example of how that works. And uh, this is a very near and dear and close to my heart. My business partner who started the Comfort Crew with me, Rhonda Englander, sadly, she passed away about 18 months ago from leukemia. But her dad was in Vietnam when she was little, and he never came home. But what happened was, all of a sudden, all the pictures got put away and nobody talked
Oh,
about it. And only when she was 12 years old in a carpool, the woman in the car said something to her about her dad dying in Vietnam. And Rhonda did not know. And,
oh my goodness.
and all of a sudden he was gone, and there was no more mention. And she only started grieving for her dad when we started creating the Comfort Kit some 30 years later. And
Holy cow.
boy, did
Wow.
that grief come out, because it was, and it it really governed her childhood in terms of her security and
Sure.
believing in adults, because
Oh,
nobody said anything. So I think it's it's so important. And of course, the hard thing is the age group. You don't want to scare very little ones.
sure.
And that the video that I did and the books are for elementary age kids. It does nudge down a little to kindergarten. The movie does.
Yeah.
The book is a little more of a self reader, but I think using intuition as an adult, let them ask you the questions that are on their mind, and
Hmm.
you can answer them by telling them you don't know if you don't know something, and saying, well, maybe
Right.
we could try and find that out. You
Yeah.
know.
That's so good. And I think the way the movie is, because I haven't seen the book yet, but the movie, with the grandmother appearing in the dream, it's not creepy. It's all animated. It's very friendly. It's not scary. And I think that's so important for kids to realize they can still talk about the person they've lost. They can still love them, even though they're gone. And I thought maybe that wasn't stated, but just the way you presented that, it was just very much understood, like, oh yeah, this is still somebody important to me, and even though they're gone, they're still a part of me. And I thought that is it right there. I think kids just need that permission. So you
Oh,
did very well with that.
oh, thank you. And that 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 way of giving kids that permission, over the last 30 years that I've been working with kids, I have found that just giving them permission to feel is so beneficial to them. And one of the things that I found really helpful is to have something physical to attach to the
Yeah.
emotion. And I'll give you a perfect example. When I was deployed, when I was in the military, instead of taking my dog tags with me, and because I'm a little bit of a rebel, I gave my dog tags to my dad. And I said, Dad, you
Mm.
keep these and I'm coming back to get them. So don't think you're going to keep them forever. Okay. And so when I came back, I got my dog tags. And after my father died, I could not deal. I also didn't deal with the grief. I kept on pushing it away,
Mm.
and pushing it away. And if we have time on today's podcast, I would love to share a very powerful story about how I grieved for my dad.
Of
But
course.
we can talk about that later on, because it's a little bit of a story. But what I do now, Jen, is I wear my dog tag all the time,
Mm.
every day. And when I think of my dad, who's been gone for 20 years, and it
Mm.
still hurts, when I think of it, I
Yeah.
touch my dog tag and I get such a warm, loving feeling in my heart. It is so,
Yeah.
I feel connected to him. And the
Hmm.
pain over the years, it doesn't really go away. You learn to make friends with it.
Yeah.
It is that's something that we are very, very lucky that we are blessed to have, is the ability to let something carry something that maybe isn't a weight all the time, but to know that we
Hmm.
carry it with us. And that's been so helpful for me. And one of the reasons that we created the little plushy character, little mouse, in the kit and journals, is that when you can have something physical that you can connect with, your journey
Yes.
is a little easier. And one of the things I tell parents, even for very little ones, I always suggest they write a letter to the person.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, just, oh, look, let's write a letter to them and just tell them how much we miss them. And a lot of kids, and they say, well, what are we going to do with the letter? And we say, well, let's just put it on the mantle, just leave it overnight, and hopefully they will be able to get to see it. But writing the letter and telling them how you feel, because so often when somebody does pass away and there are children involved, it's very sudden. There are obviously
Yeah.
there are hospice situations, but even if you are prepared for death, it's still sudden, and it's
Hmm.
still a shock. So giving kids permission to speak to that person and tell them how they
Mm.
feel is really helpful. So by writing a letter, and then also in journals, I say to kids, we have a little grief journal in the kit, and it's just basically prompts about what are you feeling right now? What do you think that feeling means? What makes you feel better when you feel like that?
Yeah.
And in the book, I talk about it's okay to carry on with your life because that's what the person would want you to do.
Yeah.
They don't want you to be sad every single day. They
Hmm.
want you to carry on and not forget them, but just love them as hard as you can because if you are sad all the time, then they feel bad. They feel bad, and you don't want
Yeah.
them to feel bad. But on the other hand, we don't want to push sadness away
Hmm.
because the grieving process, sadness does play a huge part. But
Yeah.
allowing ourselves to be sad, but also not allowing ourselves to feel like we can't go to that situation, but we can.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of guilt, maybe, of I shouldn't enjoy myself or I shouldn't, be doing anything fun. But you're so right. They need that permission. And what you said about grief, I think even as adults, even if we're prepared, I think loss is still always a surprise. Even though that's the way life is set up, nobody gets out alive
Yeah.
and we are going to lose people. And I believe so. Rhonda passed away in early 2020, I think right around the same time my younger brother did. And so he
Yes.
was just 42. And then I think I was talking to you and I said, we're kind of in a season of grief. I lost my brother and then my father-in-law passed away in April this year. And then when a favorite uncle just died a couple weeks ago. And I had a friend call it, you're just in a season of grief. And I was like, is this the way life is going to be for the rest of my life? That it's just going to keep happening. And I think that's part of it. And we do have more access to resources and we do have more coping mechanisms as adult, but grief can just still sneak up on you and just punch you right in the teeth. You think you're doing great and woo, and it just, there it comes. And so I think maybe if you had some tips for adults coping with their own grief, and I would love to hear the story about your father and how you coped with that, because it sounds like you were a young adult when he passed away.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Rhonda was only 52, so
Oh.
she was also very young. I was 40 when my dad passed away, uh,
Mm.
and I think grief is such a strange thing. It comes up and it slaps you upside the head when you least expect it and when you don't want it. But I think one of the things that I've learned over time, and I worked extensively, oh goodness, for about 20 years with terminally ill children, and I still do when I have the
Mm.
opportunity. And I just there was one little girl in particular who was just she was so great. She was 12 years old, and she knew she was going to pass away, and everybody else, didn't
Mhm.
didn't didn't want to deal with it. And
Yeah.
I recall one day I'd been sitting in the hospital room with her for, towards the end of her life, and I imagined the Grim Reaper sort of coming to the door, and I imagined myself talking to him, and I said, "Dude, you might as well go get yourself some coffee. It's not time yet." And he
Oh.
was pacing around, and he got irritated, and he left, and then he came back the next morning, and I sent him packing, and she left during the night. She passed away, and when he came back the next morning, you know, there was a butterfly outside, and I said, "You're too late, dude."
Mm.
You know, and so
Yeah.
using metaphors like that to be able to soothe myself, I found very helpful. There's a story about a little boy, and I think this has helped me with grieving a lot too. There was a little boy at the hospital that I worked with, and I think I might have told you the story before, about a little boy who asked me what was going to happen when he died.
Mm.
His name was Victor. I'm sitting in the bed with this little boy. He's 12 years old. He's dying of cancer, and they can't give him any more chemo. And he turns to me and he says, "Hey, Trevor, what's going to happen when I die?" I'm about to
Mm.
answer him, and his mother jumped off the chair. She ran over to the bed. She said, "You are not going to die. We have spent $375,000 to keep you alive." And he sort of looks at me and he shrugs his shoulder and he sort of pulls a tongue at his mom. And so she left the room about 5 minutes later. And I said to him, hey, listen, what did you mean? What did you mean with that question? He said, no, I want to know what's going to happen when I die. I said, well, listen, I'm not quite sure, but as far as I'm concerned, we go to another place. He goes, oh, heaven. I said, yeah, someplace like that. He goes, oh, yeah, I believe that too. I said, oh, okay. He said, but do you think they give you a map when you get there? And I said, to him, what do you mean? He goes, that must be quite a big place. I said, I said, no, I'll tell you what. I've got an answer for you. I said, hang on. And so I drew a picture of my grandfather who had died, and he was such a great guy. And in my journal, I tore the picture out and I said to him, Victor, this is my grandfather. If you die from this disease, when you get up there, just ask for my grandfather. His name is Ted. He'll get you checked in. He'll get you a great room, and you just ask him. He'll look after you. And he goes, well, how am I going to find him? Like 1 million people died in the war. I said, dude, millions of people have died. I said, but everybody knows him. So you just go ask for Ted. He says, okay, thanks. He takes this picture that I drew and he put it on the little bulletin board next to his bed. Those little cork boards with all his get well cards.
Yeah.
And oh, goodness, every time I'd go in there into his room, I would tease the poor guy and he would point to that picture of my grandpa and say, I'm going to tell your grandpa when I see him, what you teasing me, you're bullying me. And I'm like, oh, no, don't. Well, sadly, that little boy passed away about 6 months later. And his mother asked me if I would go to the church and do a eulogy for him. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go to that church and I'm going to celebrate that little boy's life instead of mourning his death. I was going to do a stand-up comedy routine about that little boy because he was hilarious and he was naughty. And I was like, okay, I'm going to share some stories. So I go to the church and it was an open casket ceremony. Now, where I come from in South Africa, you don't have viewings. It's just not a cultural thing that I'd ever been exposed to before. And this little boy was in the Catholic religion, and they had a viewing. So I didn't want to remember my memory of that little boy lying in a coffin. So I didn't look in. And I went and sat down. They wheeled the coffin into the church for the ceremony. They left the thing open. And I was like, oh, my goodness. Anyway, the Father Richard comes up there and he delivered his sermon and he asked me to deliver the eulogy. And I got up and I was talking about this little kid and how funny he was and how one time he took his urine sample container and he poured apple juice into it. And when he'd seen it in a movie, and when the nurse came along, she came to collect all the urine samples from all the kids, and she picked up his sample and he said, wow, look, it's a strange color. So they're both looking at it and he pops open the lid and he drinks the whole thing.
Oh, gosh.
And he says, well, I better pass it through again. It's looking strange. And she freaked out. She thought he'd lost his mind. Of course, he said, it's apple juice. It's apple juice. She was so angry with him. She wanted to slap him upside the head. But
that's funny. She couldn't laugh.
But she did afterwards. And I shared that story. Everybody laughed. And then I just told everyone how much I'd learned from this little boy. And as I was walking down, I turned and I looked over in his coffin. And I'm so glad I looked because he looked peaceful. He looked at rest. All his toys were in that coffin. His baseball mitt, his Legos, the whole bunch of stuff. And, he was lying there. And in his hand, he was holding that picture of my grandfather. And
gosh.
I realized that so often all kids need is validation about how they are feeling. We need to be able to be with them where they are in their struggles. And it's the same thing with grief, Jen. If they are grieving, instead of trying to make it better for them and distract them and let's do this, let's do that, I think it's so important to sit down and say, man, I feel terrible. I'm sure you feel terrible. Okay. Wow. How can I support you with what you're feeling, and do you have questions? And if you do, if I can't find the answer, maybe we can look for answers together. But for them to know, because so often, what do we say to kids? It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. what that's doing
Yeah.
is dismissing them. And it leaves them to carry that pain by themselves. And if we can carry pain, shared pain is half pain. And if we can help them share the pain and allow ourselves the pain and discomfort to be in it with them, I think we can really help kids to feel. And instead of pushing feelings away, because as we get older, when we push feelings away, it messes up relationships, it messes up everything because we haven't learned to allow ourselves permission to be in a sad place, especially if it's sad. It's expected.
Yeah. That's so good. Well, did you want to tell the story about when your dad passed away?
I can tell you. I can tell you very quickly. So when my dad passed away, I sort of being the oldest of the three kids in the family, and my mom was just totally at a loss. It was very sudden. My dad was a marathon runner, and he just had an aneurysm, and he passed away at 67. Just very fit. He's the fittest dude I know that's in heaven right now. I can tell you that.
Too young.
Yeah, too young. But I didn't allow myself to grieve for my dad. Not at all. I pushed those feelings down. I'm a strong guy. I've been in the military. I can take stuff. And I pushed it down for years and years. And a number of years ago, I got invited to go to Central Africa to work with former child soldiers in Burundi and Uganda, and a number of other countries. And I found myself one day in a situation where I was with some kids who'd been former child soldiers, and they were totally shell shocked. I went in this classroom, and I was going to go and be, a kumbaya type dude who was going to make them all be in touch with their feelings, and it was going to be fantastic. And I brought my crayons and I brought paper, and I put it in front of them, and I told them all to draw me their feelings. And I mean, there are these kids sitting on the floor in a smashed out windowed classroom with dirt floors with their little chalk tablets, and they just looked through me. They had empty eyes. I should never have been there. I was way underqualified to be able to talk to somebody who'd been through more than I'll ever go in 10 lifetimes to have the audacity to go there and do that. And so I sort of just gave in, and I was going to leave. And then I realized that we did have something in common, those kids and I. All of them were orphans, and I'd lost my dad. So I said to them, guys, I think I know how some of you feel because my dad died. And as I said that, I heard this very strange noise, like a howl, like a wolf. And I'm looking around trying to figure out what was going on. And I realized the sound was coming from me. And I burst out crying, and I curled up in a ball, and I let it all out. And it's very, very interesting. Some of those kids came up to me, and they were stroking me and patting me on the head, and they helped me grieve. And in turn, we were able to connect, we were able to share, and that was the best week of my life because those kids shared everything. Once we understood we were in a similar pain. And I think that's one of the things that's important to do with kids is when you are sharing something with a kid, to be able to give a personal experience. Like you can say, you know what, I don't know how you feel, but I had a similar experience when I was a kid. My grandpa died or my dog died. And this is how I felt, because by sharing that with them, they know you have had similar feelings instead of you just being, because kids don't know that they'll see somebody cry or something, but they often think it's out of anger or frustration or because someone's been mean to them. They don't know that sometimes crying is just pain leaving your body. And so being able to be with them again, as I said earlier, in their pain, and that's how I connected with those kids, and I'm still in touch with some of them who are doing fantastically well. And I'm not saying it's because of me; it's that facility is wonderful, but giving them permission to grieve was very powerful and life changing for them.
Well, it sounds like you were the right person to be there. Honestly, for both sides, that's incredible because it is such a deep process. And, if you've never really been through it, you don't know how you're going to react to such a deep grief like that. So yeah, that sounds like it's actually a good thing that you were there.
Yeah. I've
Yeah.
got to compliment you because I know your grief after losing your brother has put you in a very difficult situation when you are doing things like a podcast and interviewing somebody, because what you're doing is you are allowing yourself to be in that position instead of running away from it. You could very easily say, you know what, I don't think I could handle a podcast about grief because of my own grief. And I think
Yeah.
this is a positive step for you, because you gave yourself permission to be where you are now,
Yeah.
and I think that's really important.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the past few months was, and you can add to this, I'm sure you have way more insight than I do. I don't remember what it was. I have some different blogs and things that I've looked at just to try to kind of process. His illness was very short, and he left 3 young kids, and
Mm,
it was rough.
sure.
But one of the best things I read, and I wish I need to go find it, and I will try to link it, was that yes, you have to process how that person died, but don't let that overshadow how they lived. Like, don't let that become your main memory of them. And that was so good for me to realize, like, yes, we had to process what happened and how, it all went down at the end. And I think this is true for anybody that you lose.
Yes.
But then you have to, that's not how I want to remember
But
him.
boy, is that the truth. I'm so glad you said that. Please find that, because goodness me,
Yeah.
that is a mantra that needs to be front and center where people can find it, because just hearing that is comforting, because we do
Yeah.
we put ourselves in the position of the person who's passed away. We imagine, and imaginations can sometimes be our worst enemy. Obviously, we imagine the worst:
Mm-hmm.
pain, discomfort, fear of the person who's passed away. And having been in hospitals for many, many, many years, and I have a number of friends who are doctors, our bodies are actually very interesting when we are in that situation where
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't feel the way we all imagine it would.
Mm.
Obviously there are certain times when there's trauma, but please do find that, and I'll be happy
I
to
will.
help you. I find
Yeah.
it. I think it's so important.
I think it's just remembering that those people that we've lost are so much more than how they died. That's not
Yes.
what should define their whole life. And that was a really healing thing for me, because we had really focused on he was too young. It was so awful and what he went through. And I was like, yes, I can acknowledge that, but also recognize the amazing life he had before those final
Yeah.
months. So,
Yeah.
and same with your friend Rhonda, just
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
she Rhonda was amazing. I mean, think about it. We often find ourselves just talking about the last few days, and
right.
then I take a deep breath and I think, oh my goodness, she started the Comfort Crew for military kids. We have spoken and helped 1 million children
That's
in
wonderful.
our 13 years of being around, and that's her life. When we started Comfort Crew, she just dedicated her life to being able to support military kids. And goodness me, that is what I try to remember, as opposed to just my
Mhm.
vision of seeing her in her worst state.
Right. Exactly.
Rather, now I just see her, standing up on a podium, being able to talk to families that we're supporting, and just seeing that big grin. Yeah, she had the biggest smile. And I always remember, I think she thought I was an absolute nutcase. And that gives me such pleasure, because I am mischievous, and I would leave her on her desk in the mornings. I'd leave her notes from her dog, or from some of the characters in my books, and I would just see her eyes roll, but I know that she loved it.
Yeah.
So that's my memories. Yeah.
And it takes some time to get there, but yeah,
Oh yes. Oh
you've got
boy,
to work through it.
absolutely.
But yeah.
There is, just like the cycle of life, there is a cycle of grief.
Sure.
And it doesn't always follow Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's pattern of you go,
No.
from pain to anger to frustration. It jumps around, and it's a roller coaster. And just being able to know, I think an important thing for anybody who is especially grieving at the moment and early in grief is like it doesn't always feel as painful as it does at the beginning.
Mm.
And as I said earlier, the pain just takes a different place in our bodies. But we are amazing in terms of having to deal with it because we had to. It's part of how people survive is by coping. And I always say to people who are alive at the moment, because I do speak to dead people in my dreams, but to the people who are alive at the moment, their record of making it through a bad day is 100%. Because they're alive. And on those days when you just want to go and join the person you lost because it's too painful to be away from them, we have to realize that there are people around us who need us. There are our families who may not be able to understand, and so we have to have our grief be a backpack instead of a roadblock, and be able to move on and carrying it in whatever way we have to.
I love that. Well, I could talk to you forever about this and many other topics. I just think you have so much insight, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to see if there's anything else you want to share. But I did want to tell listeners, if you are wanting to purchase the memory box or the resources we mentioned, the What on Earth Do You Do When Someone Dies, you can get 15% off at Trevor Romain's company with the code Jennifer, all caps, and I will share that. But definitely go take a look at that. And I am going to be getting those kits for my nieces and nephew because I think that would be great for them to make a little memory box of their dad. Their mom has done an amazing job of helping them walk through the grief, but I don't think you can ever have too many resources for sure.
I wish that I could just give every single one of those away and not. I always feel so terrible about especially because the marketing guys in our company is like, okay, well, we're going to give 15% off. I'm like, I don't even want to charge anybody who's grieving. I feel terrible, but anyway, then they yell at me. But
well, it sounds like it would be something like maybe churches or even groups, if they were supporting this sort of thing, would maybe want to just get and have on hand,
sure,
to give away.
And of course, military families. I urge you to pop in and check out Comfort Crew because there are ways there that we can help families who may not be able to. May not be able to get them for themselves. So just so that they know.
Yes. So Trevor Romain Company and Comfort Crew are two different sites, and we'll definitely link to those so everybody can find you in all the places and all the good work you're doing.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to say also that sometimes the absolute shock and discomfort and not knowing what to do for kids during a period of loss, please feel free to reach out to me. What I often do is I'll write a little note with a little cartoon for kids who may be in a tough place, and I'm happy to do that. So just reach out through our website. That's the best way to reach me. And if I can support in any way, that's one of the missions in my life, is to support kids who are going through grief. So I'm happy to do what I can to help.
That's amazing. Well, I just think what you're doing is so wonderful. You really are just giving your life to help and serve others, and big fan, of course. And I just want to support you in whatever way and get the word out. But before we close today, is there anything else you wanted to share? I know there's probably tons you still would like to share, but as we close out, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure you got to say?
What I wanted to say is that I struggle with ADD. I'm also dyslexic. And interestingly enough, I've written 50 books, but that's because I got really good support from key adults in my life. I do go off at a tangent, and wonderfully you have brought me back. But if when children are struggling like that, I think for me, knowing that I'm not being judged and as a kid, my parents giving me alternative ways to express myself through photography, through painting, through cartooning and stuff really helped me. So I just wanted to urge parents to be able to give their children a way to express their feelings instead of allowing them to build up and then express themselves in the wrong way.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to add.
Well, that's good. And I think it's so important that we join our children where they are. I think that's the message that you really send, is to be there with them, be present, don't push it aside, and let them express themselves. So
yeah.
Thank you so much again for joining me today. I just really appreciate it, Trevor.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for what you do. This is a very difficult job you have, but you continue, episode after episode. And what you're up to? What? How many now?
Almost 70.
Almost 70.
Yeah, so 3 years. I've taken a couple of breaks, which is you got to do.
Yeah.
And I think, well, as long as people are listening and reaching out and letting me know they want it, I will continue. And so they do.
And it's wonderful, because it's very, very difficult. I know, doing my own podcast, so congratulations on that, and thank you for what you're doing for our military families. I salute you.
Thank you so much. And listeners, remember, you can find Trevor and connect with him. All the links will be in the episode notes, and don't forget about that 15% discount code if you'd like to use it. So we will say goodbye, and I will talk to you guys next time. Thanks again, Trevor.
Very welcome.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a great week. Thanks for listening to the MilSpouse Matters podcast. Connect with me at milspousematters.com or on social media as @MilSpouseMatters. You can find my book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse, on Amazon and other booksellers. Love the show? Please leave a 5-star review in whatever podcast player you're listening, and then share it with someone else who could use it too. Until next time, have a great week.